focus on Liberia. Hit it. From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pocondre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia. For Liberia, Liberia. For Liberia, yeah, 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 yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday. It's focus on Liberia. Talk about home affairs. Hey. In diaspora. Foreign affairs. Reliable information. History. Ooh. Talking about culture. Politics. Education. Entertainment. Business. Sports. Advertisement. Articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Ja.
And I am Anthony Sie, and a pleasant welcome to Focus on Liberia. Thank you for joining us today. We have a familiar face, but on a very significant note here, we are here to treat a subject of not only national importance, but of global importance or relevance. And no one is better suited to discuss this particular topic. And as you can see, I'm smiling. I'm in anticipation. I know I'm the host, but I'm anticipating this subject, this topic to be discussed. We are here to discuss a very significant topic that has to do with nation building, statehood, state sovereignty, and everything a nation must understand in order to progress. What is statecraft and understanding statecraft? And the one who has read extensively about this topic as his interest and contribution to humanity, he happened to be a Liberian though. He's here to help us not only unpack what is statecraft, understanding statecraft, and all the elements of statecraft on a global level, not only Liberia. So if you are just joining us, we ask you to do us a favor by sharing the broadcast with somebody. You know, many times we take a seat by and say, but why are we stuck? Why are others making progress? Our guest, Dr. Ahmed Sirleaf, is saying we have to understand statecraft, apply all the elements of statecraft into nation building in Liberia, then we will be able to start taking those baby steps and giant steps subsequently, and Liberia will be that country we want to see. So this topic is important more than anything when it comes to governance and politics and statehood. So please join me to welcome our guest, Dr. Ahmed Kabila Sirleaf. He is focused on Liberia global governance advisor. I call him the governance wizard. And I'm not saying these words casually because of my affinity with him. This is a fellow citizen who has devoted time to understanding statecraft and how a nation and its people can use that knowledge to advance that nation for its development. Dr. Ahmed Sirleaf holds a doctorate in philosophy, in organizational leadership, policy, and development, with specialization in comparative and international development education. So this is his area. That, as we say in Liberia, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you, Anthony. I'm doing fine. It's good to see you again, my friend. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And I'm really honored to be here on Focus on Liberia again. It's Focus on Liberia is my network. This is where, for many years, we've come and engaged in the in public discourse, in the public square, trying to contribute to national development, to our country's growth and development, and the debates and conversations in a civil way. And also, dabbled into other global affairs and, comparatively, what can help our country or how Liberia can learn from others. And so I remember the Tough Talking Thursday days when we will come here with other experts and practitioners, Liberian practitioners and experts and, commentators. Essentially will come here and just engage in serious conversations. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from serious Liberians, public officials, scholars, students who say, hey, we've been following, we've been listening, we've been watching. So this is a humble conversation and a contribution to the Liberian story and to our desire to see our country make progress. So I'm happy to be here to discuss statecraft and governance and nation building and what it takes to build a country, how others have done it, and what we could learn from those experiences and what scholars and experts are saying about this subject. So thank you for inviting me. I look forward to this series because there's a whole series throughout June that we will treat this subject. Today we will try to set the stage for the series and then zoom in on statecraft and Liberia's joining and sort of look at comparatively how other nations have extricated themselves out of poverty to prosperity.
Thank you so very much. And we cannot thank you enough for always availing yourself to discuss, important national issue, especially this one. Statecraft is something that we as a people really need to discuss. And
please share the link. People are asking me for the link.
Okay.
For this broadcast, if you can
yes,
put it somewhere.
Please share the link. I send it to your WhatsApp, or you can take this time and send that to your friends. I've also shared in many chat rooms, and we are asking those who are here to do us that favor as your participatory role here by sharing this significant broadcast with fellow Liberians, even your foreign friends, because this discussion, like the guest said, is on a global level. We need to understand what is statecraft, not nationally, but also globally. And these are the nuances that he will be driving us through, because the world now, people say it's a global village, which is true. Whatever affects people in the Middle East will trickle down even in Monrovia, even in Washington, and we all see it. And so please share the broadcast and let's get started here. So that, first of all, how's family? All this hard work you've been doing. Your family been staying. How they doing, by the way?
Absolutely, family's doing well. We're grateful to God. The kids are doing well. They're growing. They're studying, they're doing, some are doing university, some are doing high school. Um, everybody's doing well. We're grateful to God.
Excellent, excellent. And so, like we said, we are here to discuss the topic statecraft. What is statecraft and understanding statecraft? In part one, we will be looking at understanding statecraft. So that let's set the basis here.
Right.
What is statecraft? Someone listening to us, maybe hearing the word for the first time, or might have heard the word before, but have not taken time to say, but what does it actually mean? Help us here. What is statecraft?
Thank you, Anthony. Again, it's an honor to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to welcome all of our viewing audience out there, those who will watch later on. I look forward to their feedback, and other experts and scholars who are interested in this subject, in subject of development practice, nation building, because there are different interdisciplinary practices that constitute statecraft, and we will talk about some of those. So I look forward to the feedback and contributions. Unfortunately, I'm not looking at the chat and see what people are saying, so I could really know. I'll have to figure out the link later on. But statecraft is not about definition. I'm not here tonight just to really focus on a sort of cursory definition of a word. Anyone can look up a word nowadays with generative AI. Anyone can type in statecraft and they will read something and know what it is. But really, from our perspective, and for purposes of this discussion, nation building, and where Liberia fits in all of this, we will look at statecraft as a, and the way other countries have used it as a way of utilizing a country's natural resources, a country's human capital, and everything at its disposal to ensure that its strategic goals are met. Every country must have strategic interest, right, in international relations. And in strategic studies, which is security studies, there are full acronym. There's an acronym, a four-letter word. It's called DIME, D-I-M-E. DIME talks about state power. So D-I-M-E, the D stands for, so the tools of state power. The D stands for diplomacy. How a country deploys diplomacy outward, statecraft on the international stage. Right, and we will come back and sort of break that down. And then information, and whether it's public diplomacy, whether it's psychological warfare, some kind of, and now new media, in the social media space, what kind of advocacy campaign a country engages in, or image building, image maintenance campaign a country engages in, using information techniques to ensure that the national strategic interest is met or protected. And then the M stands for military. Most countries, except for a few countries, maybe Costa Rica, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and which other country, don't have military, real formal armies. But most countries have armies, they have military, right? So you use the military as a tool of state power. How do you project the military externally to protect the domestic front? And then the E in DIME stands for the economics. How do you use economic power? If we look at United States, China, and European powers, how they use the economic powers to project power and protect the home front, and also ensure that domestic policies in the country advances at home using economic power. And in the last 20 years, some scholars and practitioners have added FIL to the DIME. So now there's a DIME field where you look at the financial crimes and fighting financial crimes to ensure that the country is protected, fighting frauds and wire fraud and all of that. and then intelligence and law enforcement. So, but really, traditionally, when we're talking about statecraft, all the books and the scholars who have done work on this subject, they really look at that DIME concept. People at the Harvard Kennedy School, like Matt Andrews, Len Pritchett, and some other scholars there, they have their own concept of how to break this down, right? They talk about building state capability. They have a tool called PDIA, problem-driven iterative adaptation. So how do you really do actual development? We'll come to the various elements to talk about that. But in short, statecraft is the ability of leaders of a country. Let's really break it down, bring it down to our level here. Right. Leaders of a country, be they political leaders or economic leaders, mostly political leaders, how do they engage in a skillful, efficient way in to run the public administration of their country? How do they manage the country's resources so efficiently that makes the country prosperous? Right? What kind of skills do they have? What kind of mindset do they have? How do they employ different resources of state, different tools of state power that I've just talked about, a DIME concept. But then, natural resources and human capital, how do you use these as a matter of strategic direction to lead your country to prosperity and prevent harm from coming to your country? Sometimes some scholars or practitioners call it statesmanship or statewomanship, whatever you need. Essentially, that leader or that group of leaders, the acumen that they possess, the vision that they have for their country, and what tools do they deploy to ensure that their country is prosperous, their country grows, and to protect their country citizens from harm, to ensure that the in the sovereignty and political independence of the state itself, the nation state itself, is maintained. So really, statecraft, as we go throughout this series, as we talk about institutions and talk about other elements of statecraft, it's the decision, again, the decision that country makes. Some countries decide that they will focus their statecraft internally, domestic, to grow strategically, to deploy different aspects of state power, to ensure that they grow internally so they can project power by internal growth and prestige. Some other countries focus on deploying statecraft externally, right? Deploying tools like sanctions, military projection, giving military assistance to allies, and engaging in warfare, engaging in threats of violence or threats of warfare, things like that, and economic sabotage. All of these things, economic sabotage and economic partnership and alliances, these are all practices of statecraft. It has to be intentional. It has to be strategic to an end, right? There's a goal that you're trying to achieve with any particular direction you take, knowing that you're deploying statecraft to ensure that your country's strategic interest is met.
So, Dr. Sirleaf, one must ask though, how then does statecraft different from politics, governance, and leadership?
Yes, thank you. These are different domains, right? I mean, I know we have different audiences tonight, and those who will watch later on. Some are academics, some are scholars, some are practitioners, some are ordinary citizens. So we're really trying to make sure everybody benefits, and I'm looking for feedback from everyone. Those are different areas, different domains, right? Sometimes they're interchangeable, they're interrelated, but different domains. Leadership is looking at influence. How do you influence others to have them do what you want them to do, essentially. So as a leader, I always give this example, which I learned from the book written by former Ambassador Dennis Ross, who talks about a leader must see themselves, in order to deploy statecraft, a leader must see themselves as a conductor of what they call a symphony orchestra conductor, or conductor of philharmonic, or whatever. if you're familiar with this, the musical analogy, where you have multiple instruments and different musicians who have been trained. Some are trained in the trombone, some in the celloist, some are violinists, some play viola. But all of them, at the end of the day, are producing a harmonious, beautiful sound music. And the conductor is up there ensuring that different musician who has different unique instrument is contributing to the beautiful music that's been produced. So leadership is influencing all of the different players, ensuring different tools and skill set that they're deploying, right? Leadership is important to statecraft, but leadership is not statecraft. Statecraft can be leadership because you need a leader to drive strategic direction. Politics is it's you understand the domain of politics. It's people trying to attain power of some sort, national power, and engage in competition to maintain that power. And whether is a legislative elected power, whether it's presidential power, whether it's appointive power, you can be appointed. You are a politician still, because you have organizational politics, government politics, national politics to deal with. You can be a minister, you're a politician. You're a legislator, obviously you are a politician, right? Because you went through a political process to get in office. But the point here is that politics is a tool of statecraft, but it's not statecraft in and of itself. It contributes to statecraft. Politics contributes to nation building. For instance, when we talk about institutions, and later on, you discover that what really move institutions, or when we're talking about institutions, you're looking at who has power. What kind of power do you have? Is it economic power or political power? Is it economic institutions or political institutions? What does that mean? And do you have broad-based political power to the citizens, or you have power just being held by the elites, right? And so those are all political processes, right? So yes, leadership is important in this process. So is politics, but we have to understand that statecraft is really mastering what it takes to make a country prosperous, and how do you deploy the tools of state power to do so.
One interesting question so can a nation, all right, have good political leaders and but still feel as statecraft?
Yes. Yes. So the different scholars, there's the famous book, Why Nations Fail. Asmaglu and Robinson wrote a very famous book about development. They ask why nations fail. They have what they call the theories that don't work. They have different hypotheses, right? They look at the culture hypothesis. Is it culture that makes a country successful, or to struggle or not fail? Is it geography? Is it if the country is landlocked and where the country is located? Is that the reason why? And then they give some examples that that's not the case, and then the other hypothesis they discuss in their book is what they call the ignorance hypothesis, where they say, is it that the leaders don't know what they're doing? They don't have the necessary skills, or that the market structure that they've set up, there's market failures, right? In markets, we can go into that. What does that mean? But market failures, right? Whether you are producing and growing different agricultural crops, and to be able to access some markets, and or set up some financial system in your own country, and that's not working, that's failing consistently. Is that why? So yes, you can have leaders who are competent, but if they haven't deployed the right tools of statecraft, they haven't engaged in the proper statecraft, which is that they do not understand or have neglected intentionally to deploy the tools of state power, the diplomacy properly, information properly, military properly, economics properly, to ensure that there's prosperity for the people, for citizens. Okay, so yes, those leaders They're there, they're competent, but they're not intentional about making the country prosperous. They're not intentional. Their statecraft is for self. That's the form of government, the form of what makes the country to be poor, that discussed in the Why Nations Fail. You know, they give the Tahrir Square, the Arab Spring example of various countries. They say, what really drove those people in the streets to fight against at least their leaders? You know, then they give the example of Egypt. They say, well, look, you can change a regime and change different elites time and again if those in power haven't given broad political powers to citizens so that they can be free to innovate, so they can question government. Because if you have citizens have political powers, it means they're controlling the elite. They're controlling what the government does. They're electing the people. Those that are leading in government are the representatives of citizens. So sovereignty and power lies with the citizens, right? So yeah, you can have politicians, you can have leaders who are very educated, who are competent, yet their country is poor and not prosperous, yet they do not understand statecraft, or that they do not intend to make the masses of the people prosperous because they want to appropriate political power and economic wealth to themselves. I don't know, I can't hear you. Maybe something went wrong.
Yeah, my next question, sorry about that, is how does statecraft transform national potential into measurable progress?
Yes, thank you. We've seen, again, some countries in our comparative studies here and they have strategically utilized statecraft and became prosperous. So the Singapore example, go you look at Eastern Asian countries, right? Taiwan. What happened in Singapore? Singapore was a part of Malaysia, and they were evicted. I mean, evicted out of Malaysia, really, because of some internal ethnic, Malays and Chinese riots and tribal crisis. The Malaysian authorities back in 1965 intentionally realized the strategic move here is to decouple with this small island country that is part of our federation, which is known as Singapore. And Singapore was a very poor country. It's very, very poor back then. In the 19th century, they didn't even have a source of water. They were sitting on water, but they didn't have clean drinking water. It had to be, water brought in from some Malaysian provinces. So what happened when they were expelled and evicted? Think about that, a country being evicted from another country, right? It's like you evict a county of a Liberian county out of Liberia. You say, look, this particular county, their continued presence in the country will create future problem for this country. The only solution we have is to let them go. So they let Singapore go in 1965. The whole movement of what could grow Singapore began in 1954 with this Lee Kuan Yew and others. But really, 1965, when they got kicked out, they decided, look, we were hoping that Malaysia, the markets in Malaysia, the economic boom will spill over to Singapore, and then, we too will become prosperous. But now they've kicked us out. How do we survive? They look externally, right? They look to multinational corporations. They look to different markets. Though they were poor countries, they look, we want to educate our people. We want to focus on science, technology, engineering, education. We don't have any natural resources other than water that we're sitting on here. And they focus on educating their people, science, technology, education. That's what they focus on. So that's a strategic decision, right, for a country to utilize its potential for growth. And they started, educating their people. It was slow. Then the other thing they looked at was the housing situation was not good at all for the peasants and poor Chinese Malay people who make up of the population of Singapore. And they started asking these multinational corporations that they were asking to help to create this hub of offshore um, business centers in this country that's trying to take off to help them with public housing projects for their citizens. So they say, look, we may look poor, but we believe that we can grow from within, but we need external support, right? So the progress, the measurable progress there was they looked outside. South Korea, after the devastation of the war in that peninsula, the between North and South Korea, the same region, same people, same language. But look at the two Koreas today. What did South Korea do after the war? They decided that they will look at economic development, foreign aid as an asset. So it's not a handout. Any foreign aid they got, they established something called the Economic Stabilization Board. So that any foreign assistance they got, they were pushing donors to ensure that there was massive investment in public investments. You got to build dams for us, you got to build electricity for us. And then they educated their people too. They focus on technology as well and agriculture. So yes, you can use the potential of the country. In fact, that is an exercise, a practice of statecraft. That ability to interpret and draw a strategic vision for the country and say, we must go in this strategic direction to survive or to take off, to prosper. That is what's known as statecraft, essentially. And that's what countries ought to do. To be able, they ought to know their own situation, their own context, and decide what is it that can we learn from others, right? Not transplant exactly, import what they're doing exactly here, because every culture is unique and different. Every society is unique and different. And we see that in the development literature, right? It's called the policy transplantation or the development trap, the capability trap that's talked about at Kennedy School, where you think, all right, because something worked in Tanzania or it worked in Sierra Leone, it can work in Liberia. And then you let these international bodies, whether it's World Bank or IMF, whatever, they bring that to Liberia, and it doesn't work. So yes, you can use a country's potentials and really make measurable progress if you deploy statecraft very wisely.
Thank you. Every country has citizens, and you will talk to us about the human resource, right? And so that brings me to the citizen involvement here in statecraft. And the question I ask Dr. Sirleaf is, why should citizens care about statecraft rather than just the outcome of election? In other words, should citizens care and have interest in understanding statecraft?
Yes, citizens should care, because for citizens, they may not call it statecraft. What they're looking to understand is that they're seeing measurable progress, right? They're seeing impact on their lives. They're seeing jobs. They're seeing the services that the government is providing using the resources of the state that the government is providing or not providing. Whether education is there, is high quality, whether that they have schools that are good quality schools that can compete, training the workforce, the labor force, and allow them to compete globally. Whether the government is creating opportunities for these citizens. So this is where, when we discuss in institutions, this is where you're looking at economic institutions and political institutions, because in the political institution, you're trying to spread out power, what they call political power, broad-based political power to citizens, the right to advocate. Some scholars call it the development as freedom, right? The right to have property rights, the right to go to court and know that you'll get justice when something happens in this society. The right to hold the government accountable, that you can elect people and you can also remove them from office. The right to advocate, to organize trade unions, advocacy groups, that you can actually advocate and ensure that there's rule of law, is a constitutional democracy, or is a system that respects the law. Okay, so that's why citizens must be interested in statecraft, because they are part of statecraft. Citizens is not a mutually exclusive sort of situation, or a binary situation. You don't have citizens, or you have to have both, because what statecraft is doing is for and on behalf of the citizens, the masses, right? And so ideally, yes, citizens should care about statecraft, because then it will help them to hold those in authority, the elites. It will help them to hold them accountable, to say, look, we don't see regular, consistent electricity supply here. Why is that the case? Our schools are not working. Why is that the case? Our healthcare system sucks. It's not working. People are dying. Doctors are not trained properly, or if they're trained, they don't have the right resources, the right environment to practice medicine, to help, support people. All kinds of things. They don't have social safety net. People who households that are struggling. There's no public assistance to support them. These are the kinds of ways that citizens can measure whether statecraft is working in their interest or not, and how they can participate in statecraft.
And is there a guarantee that when the citizens are conscious about statecraft and how it impact them, will it actually move the nation forward into achieving the dividends of statecraft?
Absolutely, yes. Then because it will create an environment of innovation. Citizens will be free to establish enterprises, to establish businesses, knowing that they can secure loans, for example, on the practical side, knowing that they can, the government will create what I call this enabling environment for business, private sector to thrive. And so people will have employment, people will have the right training and education, science, technology kind of training and education. And that citizens will realize the benefits of their citizenship, because citizenship is a double-edged sword, as they say. It has rights and obligations, right? So you have rights as citizens; those are called positive rights, but you also have obligations, the so-called negative rights, which means your citizenship, the exercise of your citizenship, has to respect the other people's exercise of their own citizenship. At the same time, we expect that you engage civically, in your civic engagement. You engage in a way that will ensure that the social cultural aspect of the society is moving. So, for example, if you look at different social institutions, the family or religious institutions, for example, right? So citizens, families are helping to produce high quality citizens, by ensuring that there's morality, there's training, there's education, there's that people are trained and brought up in a way that they can work with total strangers for the common good. And so by doing so, citizens are contributing immensely to the prosperity and the growth of the country.
All right. So my next question is that, so what are the other warning signs? What are the other warning signs that a nation is neglecting statecraft? I mean, my simple question is, what happens if a nation neglects statecraft?
Yeah, you see some of what I'm mentioning as services to citizens. You see neglect. You see neglect. You see in your capital city, the garbage everywhere is uncollected. You see that children on the radio, the quality of journalism is poor. You see that the medical school is struggling, is training people who really need additional training and inadequately trained. And the medical outcomes can tell you that people need really sophisticated training, and they need a facility, they need proper trainers and educators and professors, and then the support. Once they are professionals, they are practicing. All of these things are the signs of failures of statecraft. If you see a country that is rich in natural resources, first of all, let's establish just because a country is rich in natural resources does not make that country prosperous. But by itself, in and of itself, does not make the country, prosperous or successful, right? Is the deployment of proper statecraft, how the country ensures that the natural resources of the country, be they those beneath the feet of people in the ground, or the ones that are buried in the human beings that are walking around, citizens of that country, or that is around them in their geography. All of them are all natural resources. How does a country deploy its natural resources to meet its strategic goal? To ensure that the country is prosperous, citizens are doing well. If you see that the country does not even have the ability to independently report extraction, raw material extraction from its country, is the concessionaires who are extracting the raw materials that are the ones self-reporting to you. That's a warning sign that statecraft is failing. If you see you don't have high quality schools, that's a warning sign. If your country is not respected abroad, if your country, does not have an educated labor workforce to participate, in a labor force, and they cannot contribute significantly. And then economists tell us about, the per capita income of citizens, otherwise known as GDP, that they call GDP, right? And what's the measure of your GDP, and how do we know the sort of earning power of your citizens, and therefore standard of living of your citizens? So we see institutional failures, we see system failure, whether on the social side, on the economic side, on the human capital side. Those are all early warnings that statecraft is failing. It's not properly deployed or not understood, or things are not done intentionally. People are just engaging in what they think is development.
Dr. Sirleaf, someone may be getting the impression that, well, if a nation understands statecraft with its citizens being involved, it is impossible for that nation to do poorly. Is that impression realistic?
Yeah, look, the different scholars that come at this differently, and I'll try to explain some of the perspectives, and then I'll bring my own view in here, right? So if you look at this book that I so love, it's called Why Nations Fail, This Too, and the Nobel laureate, the won the Nobel Prize in Economics, Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson, these two, they talk about institutions. They really focus on institutions. They say, look, your country is not poor because of your geography, because of your culture, because of ignorance. And you're not just, and it's not by luck that a country becomes prosperous. It's intentional deployment of statecraft, intentional deployment and use of the tools of state power to ensure that your country grows. And you can do that in what they call cultivating and building inclusive institutions. Right. You have a thing about extractive institution. And then there are other scholars, like Jeffrey Sachs, who's an economist, who talks about, hey, man, geography plays a role. You can have a country that's struggling from malaria, from diseases that doesn't grow crops properly because there are crop failures and all of these things. They're all geographical factors, right? They need some form of subsidies and support in the agriculture sector. You need pest control. You need to fight disease. So that's kind of where Jeffrey Sachs comes in. And then Dambisa Moyo talks about dead aid. Aid doesn't help. Let's focus, open markets to all nations so that they can access markets. And Ian Morris and others who talk about and there's other author that I read in grad school a long time ago, Jared Diamond, who talks about geography is what makes a country poor or prosperous. He gives the example of the European, industrial revolution, how England grew, and then the rest of Western Europe picked up, and then what happened in Eastern Europe. And Acemoglu too, they have their own argument about that. And then other people like, those who talk about geography as a factor, right? And even Bill Gates talks about, look at China, the China example that Gates gives all the time. He's not a scholar on this, but he's a billionaire who gives money for different things. He said, look, institution is not their own. Institutionalists are wrong because China is an autocratic society. They have a centralized political power system appropriated to the elite. Look at them today. They are prosperous, the second most prosperous economy, though it's still technically considered a developing country, but they're very prosperous. So his argument is they don't have inclusive institutions in China, yet they're prosperous. What are they using? Their geography. They're using different methods, and training people in technology and competing economically. Their tools, the dime, they're using the DIME concept, right? And they say, look, so institutions doesn't work. They don't work in China. Yes, yet China is prosperous. How do you explain that? So the point I'm making is the different viewpoints about this, right? But when we come to the deployment of statecraft, Diamond and others say, yeah, you can use statecraft in a geography argument, and he gives example of the Atlantic Ocean coast in England and countries and regions that are along the Atlantic Ocean that they were unreachable before, but now with the advancement of navigation of the ocean and air travel and science and technological advancement, now people have started investing along those coasts. So geography can be a factor of prosperity. At the same time, it can be a factor of poverty. That's the argument that some scholars are making, right?
And on the geography argument that the scholars are exploring that, I have a question. So let's look at Africa, a continent that you are familiar with, right? Let's use West Africa as an example. Yeah. We know the level of poverty, not because there's a lack of natural resources. I'm sure you will argue is because of governance, statecraft, and leadership, and so on and so forth. So are they arguing that if West Africa, for example, let's say a nation in West Africa starts to do well economically, let's say Ivory Coast is doing well, booming, and that would trickle down into Liberia and have a ripple effect in terms of, is that your argument?
No, that's not a geography argument. The geography argument, they're really trying to look at countries that are landlocked and how do they grow, and countries that are very far away countries, like Afghanistan and other countries like that, how do they grow? Are countries that they don't have good soil, like the Jared Diamond argument that crop failures, you can't even really do agriculture properly. You have to, that's part of the Jeffrey Sachs argument as well. You have to treat the soil, you have to treat diseases and pest control and all of that. But your question though is digging at part of the argument that another scholar brought around geography is about who's in your neighborhood.
Right.
And the people in your neighborhood, how are they? I think that's the bottom billion argument about who's in the neighborhood and how well are they doing? Are they friendly people to you? Are they friendly countries or hostile countries who are trying to fight you for your natural resources, for territory? Are they stable countries? If your neighbor, you have countries that don't have centralized government, persistent civil conflict or some kind of wars going on. So the Somalia example they always give, or so-called failed state. How does that impact you if Ivory Coast is doing well? So can that automatically spill over to Liberia? No. It has to be both Ivory Coast and Liberia must deploy statecraft in a way that equalize intentionally, intentional cooperation. That's international relations, right? Although they're just next door neighbors, but still international relations, economic integration, cultural integration, people-to-people relationship, deploying information and all of that. How do these countries around the Ivory Coast manage themselves to benefit from the supposed prosperity of Ivory Coast, as you are suggesting? Do they learn from what Ivory Coast is doing and then try to see how they can replicate some of that back home? Or do they just hope that cross-border trade and people-to-people relationship will spill over the prosperity from a successful neighboring country? It doesn't happen just accidentally. At least that's not what the literature is showing.
And that from what you are conveying here is Statecraft is more about nation building, right?
Yes.
It's the architecture around nation building.
That's correct.
Fine. So I mean, so let's look at long-term thinking for a nation, applying all the elements of statecraft, right? So let's use Liberia as a case now, given our struggle in terms of national development. If we start to look at long-term thinking strategically using all the elements of statecraft, how will you explain that for a Liberian to understand?
Oh man, Liberia is a very interesting case. And, it's not particularly unique because in history, some of what I'm mentioning here, other countries have experienced similar things where elites come in, they build a system that serves the elites and doesn't trickle down so the institutionalists. That's their argument that Liberia, you had a country that was settled by free African slaves who so on the basis of liberation and freedom, right? And people came and met some people there. Those who came learned, they brought some of what they knew from the Americas and deployed some of those. And then they built institutions, well, just to serve themselves, essentially. And it's in the literature. It's not me saying it, right? This is not to blame one particular group, but just to look at what history is showing us. And I'm not a historian. I don't claim that, but what we are reading in the literature out there. Okay, so this group that came, the settler group, they built some institutions along the coast and they settled there, but it was mainly serving themselves. By and large, they tried to build a nation, but integration was slow. They didn't trickle to the rest of the population, those others they met there in the interior part of Liberia. Okay, and so the legacy of that has been carried over for many decades, and we're seeing the vestiges of some of that today that we're suffering from. That's where I'm bringing that from, which is the example.
And that was that intentional, or was it due to limitation, or maybe not much resources? Where are the constraints?
There was, so many different factors. Some of them were like, okay, we don't know these people we met here. They too don't know us. We have to survive, first of all. We have to be, it's a new land, new environment. When the settlers arrived, the different voyages arrived, it was a rough time, right? It was a rough time, rough environment. Some people died from tropical diseases. People were, all those various settlements around Monrovia, those were farm countries. Those were people living rough lives, rural lives, right? And they too, you can imagine, they were really focusing on surviving, and then to build a system that really just served this population that came and settled. And then later on, they're like, oh, we met some people here. So how do we build a nation, actually? First, they fought and got independence, 1847, for sovereignty purposes, for legal purposes, so the French could stop encroaching, and so that they could also get revenue. And so independence was a priority. They did that. If you look at the institutionalist argument, they're saying the legacy that we've inherited in Liberia was one of top down. So elites control power for themselves and therefore control the wealth at the top. There was no broad-based political power to the rest of the population. And so it stifled innovation and growth. That's the institutionalist argument. So if you go with just that argument, Anthony, you'll see our history has been, you change one elite regime to another elite regime that is practicing the same appropriation of political power to protect their wealth. So this day, we have.
Yeah, go ahead.
I said, to this day, that's what we have.
To this date, That is what we have. If you are just joining us, we want to say welcome to Focus on Liberia. We are on a very important global topic here, understanding statecraft. What is statecraft and understanding statecraft? We're going to move next into part 2, all right, where we will talk about the 4 pillars of nation building. That is also part of statecraft. And our guest here is Dr. Ahmed Sirleaf. He's a global development scholar practitioner, and he also having to be focused on Liberia global governance advisor and practitioner. We want to say welcome. If you are just joining us, we can welcome you enough. Share the broadcast with somebody. Understanding statecraft, he argues, is good for nation building. And when leaders understand statecraft, they will know how to deploy all the resources available in the nation, from the resources on the ground to the one on the soil, the human capital, how to even prepare or educate, the citizens. And when they have the intentionality, he argues, of what statecraft is meant for, that country definitely will make progress. And he said, hey, I'm asking the question, why are all the nations doing well, and we struggling? He said that we don't understand statecraft. So, folks, let's move to the next segment that we now want to talk about. Part 2 of this discussion, which is the 4 pillars of nation building on a statecraft. Let me list them for you and you come in. So you are saying, well, national vision and strategic direction. We will look at that. And next, we'll look at strong and capable institution. All right. And then we'll also look at the human capital development as 3. And 4, we will look at social trust and national cohesion. These are very, very 4 important pillars here. So let's get to them quickly. Looking at, pillar 1, national vision and strategic direction. What are you talking about here?
What we're saying here is the ruling elite, the leaders of the country, must be intentional about where they're taking the country.
Okay.
What they believe at a particular point in time in their leadership, what is the most strategic leadership task ahead of them that will help to bring prosperity to their people. There are some examples to give. The people of Singapore realized that they got kicked out of Malaysia. They quickly had to do something to look outside externally in order to survive. And then educate their children in science, technology, build housing for their poor people. Those were the visionary and strategic direction that they had to go to survive and prosper, to take off. And in a war-devastated South Korea, when Korea was divided, right? The leaders there said, look, we'll take foreign aid, but we don't treat it as a handout. Let's establish a board, an institution that controls foreign aid as a strategic asset. Let's train our children in science, technology, computer science. Let's industrialize. That's what South Korea. So that is the vision. That's the strategic direction they went in. In Rwanda, after the genocide, they decided that, look, reconciliation and ethnic stabilization is our strategic direction. That's what will help us survive and be prosperous. There will only be one Rwanda. There's no Hutu, no Tutsi. Today, you go to Rwanda, you don't ask people what's their tribe, like we do in Liberia. They decided to focus on unifying their country by playing down the ethnic tension, this tribal ethnic division, and try to socialize the society, acculturate the society into seeing themselves as one Rwanda. That's the visionary strategic direction that country went in. And then they did other things, fiscal discipline, and, how do we build our country economically and develop the country. You look at Botswana. They say, look, we're a landlocked country surrounded by hostile apartheid, regimes around us. How do we survive? They look beneath their feet, underneath, in the ground, the diamonds, the natural resources there, and the natural resources within themselves, the citizens, the children, They said, look, we will use the diamonds from underneath to build high quality schools. That's what we're talking about, Anthony. A country must have a vision and the strategic direction in which they want to go. You can't be everywhere. And all right, we need to build roads. Roads are important, but to what end? Explain to us, the citizens, why roads are the strategic direction now. You say, okay, Lord, it will open up the country, it will spur growth, it will be farm to market, it will help us to do agriculture. When we industrialize, it will help people to travel, to freely move, or it will bring social cohesion, reconciliation. If you're intentional about that, that's the practice and exercise of statecraft. You can see that's very intentional, right?
Yeah.
You say, look, we have few kilometers of paved roads, therefore we need more roads. That's well and good, but that's not strategic. It's not visionary, because you're just doing it because you need more roads. If you don't have stable electricity, energy supply in your country, you say, all right, what do we do? They say, okay, do this, a little bit of solarization, a little bit of improve your hydropower and do this, and you have multiple sources of electricity you can distribute to the people, and then they'll start complaining. What is the strategic end to that? To what end? You must know. You have that vision for, look, our country needs industries, maybe light manufacturing to start with. Then we identify the regions in Liberia that we can do cassava manufacturing, maybe in northeastern Liberia, maybe on the western side. You know, you look at western Liberia, then you look at the southeast. These various regions, what can we do to create hubs of economic development in these? To do that, our big binding constraints are roads. So you see, that's vision, right? That's strategic direction. We need to industrialize. We cannot do so without roads. We cannot do so without energy supply. Sufficient, affordable electricity. How do we do it? What are the outcomes that we're looking for? You identify all of those things intentionally, and then you source the funding, you deploy the funding to do the work. So that at the end of the day, that strategic direction is being traveled and the vision is being realized.
And so my question is, I guess a nation will not arrive at its national vision and strategic direction. So assessment of where they want to go must be arrived at. So tell me, what must the nation do first? All right, to form that national vision and strategic direction.
We've tried some of it in Liberia. It's called the visioning exercise. They're doing President Sirleaf's second term, I believe it was, Vision 2030, the national visioning exercise. It's basically planning. Countries engage in the strategic planning exercise to say, all right, so you look at the tools of state power. What are our comparative and competitive advantages here? You identify those. You do whatever an analytical metrics you use, and say, okay, so in order for growth to happen, this must happen. So you do that analysis, and different social analysis will happen, the economic analysis, growth analysis, constraint analysis. The people who are experts in those areas, you bring them together. You can even go and look at the history, look at the social cultural context in the post-conflict country, where we came from, our history. What would be realistic for us now to help us to take off as a country? So all of those difficult questions must be asked, bring the right experts to the table, internally and externally. You can seek advice, but don't transplant what's called the capability trap, because there's another big element. It's called state capability. The ability, and the guys at the Kennedy School, they're big about this. They talk about a number of things. And so the state capability, there's a thing called premature load bearing. And we, in post-conflict Liberia, we've been suffering from premature load bearing. What is that? It means we get this development, actors come to us and say, look, All right, we want you to build this institution, like Bureau Revenue Authority. There was a revenue component at your Ministry of Finance, build a separate entity, and then build this other, and create this other institution. Now they need to be doing this, doing that, but you haven't built the internal capacity for that institution to actually do what it ought to do. At the same Canada school, they have a thing called isomorphic mimicry. They give an example of two snakes, green snake. They look alike. When you see them in the forest, you can't tell which is which. They're like twin. They look exact. One is dangerous, venomous snake. If it bites you, you die. The other one's so harmless, you can play with it, you can make it a pet, but you don't know the difference. So they say, yeah, if you do that, you are mimicking institutionalism. You build a ministry, an agency that looks like a ministry, but does not have the power, does not have the resources, does not have the capacity to truly deliver like that institution. Therefore, that's isomorphic mimicry. You just mimic. It looks like the snake, but it's not the snake. It looks like that dangerous snake, but really it's not. So you're mimicking, right? This is called isomorphic mimicry. So they say, don't mimic. Allow people to strategically fail, to try and fail and learn in this context. Give them that right to test, fail, learn from the failure, adapt, and build what works for this context, what works for these people. And then give the institution the capacity. Give them it's called the authorizing environment, right? Street agent bureaucrats, we call them street level bureaucrats and office sort of level bureaucrats. Street level bureaucrats are people like police officers, immigration officers. Those are symbols of state. When you arrive at the airport in any country, the people you encounter are security personnel, immigration folks, they're wearing uniform, some badge, right? So that's a sign of state. This country, this is the country I'm in, right? Those are bureaucrats. Authorize them, give them some freedom to try and test things, let them work. But don't say because we see in America, people wear blue uniform, we put blue uniform on our people in Liberia. They don't have the similar or same training. They don't have same capacity. So they look like the real snake, but they're not the real snake. They're not the real institution. Okay. So go away from that and really try to, your question there, I know I sort of meandered around and to come to it, do that planning, engage in some real soul searching with different groups of people, involve the people, do consultation, identify what your national strategic interest is. Then you can even establish a foreign policy objective that will support the national domestic strategic objective. If you don't have that, you haven't identified it yet, you cannot do foreign affairs properly. You just be running around because you don't really know what foreign affairs should aggregate to what end. You don't really have that. At the same time, you can't do education properly. You can't do healthcare properly. You can really provide social services to the people.
So then on this pillar one, which is the national vision and strategic direction, the question I have is, does every country need a long-term plan or vision? If so, why?
Yes, look, for the last 100 years, China has had one single long-term goal, which is to become the superpower of the world, to overtake the United States of America, economically, militarily, and they've systematically planned to every single thing every Chinese leader does is towards that goal, that vision. So the strategic direction that leads them there is what? Science, technology, computer engineering, business, maritime, security, strategic study, all these things they're doing. So today you see them getting closer and closer and closer. They're very patient. It's called strategic patience. The United States of America, their national strategic goal is said to protect the American people. So national security. That national security is interpreted in so many different ways and domains. So it's just the label national security is the cover. Okay, it will be, look, we want military advantage, military dominance abroad. So we have bases in all regions of the country. No matter what it takes, we will have bases in every country around the world. Wherever we think, whatever region we think is strategic to us, we'll have a presence there militarily. So you see the DIA.
It could be economic power, both
and then,
domestically and internationally.
Yes, they deploy economic power where they need to do. Look, they have soft power with the USAID, the foreign aid agency, which they dismantle. It's a big mistake, but I think it will come around to it, right? But the point is, they have a strategic interest. They believe there are countries that are targeting them, and they must do everything to fend them off while they continue to grow their prosperity, the economic prosperity that draws people to America. Okay, so other countries, we've named some countries tonight in this discussion. We've named Singapore, we've named South Korea, we've named China, Botswana, Rwanda. We've named all these countries. If you look at them, what we've talked about so far, Anthony, they have long-term vision, or at least some of them had long-term vision, and the vision can shift too. Right? It can shift depending on external factors or perhaps some internal factors. So if there's a massive natural disaster that decimated a whole region of the country or took away the technocraft, and Rwanda had a genocide, a lot of the technicians were killed, so they had to recalibrate. But a country must be intentional about how it is going and how it will go, where it will go, what will take them to that place to which they would like to go.
Dr. Sirleaf, talking about, long-term vision for the country, right? Embedding it, national vision and strategic direction. For Liberia in particular, let be practical on Liberia here, and I want you to, looking at Liberia, you understand the country, you're always there, you read, you interact with people every day. We all talk about Liberia. Looking at where we are now as a country, we should develop a national vision and strategic direction. What element do you think can serve as a catalyst for us to have that leap? Will it be education? In the case of Rwanda, you explain here that they look at what reconciliation and social cohesion. And then everything else kind of started along. For Liberia, what must it be?
It must be continuity of policy and government.
Okay.
New administration comes, they see themselves as the government of Liberia. Yes, they are in the exercise of the government of Liberia, but the government of the republic always lives, always exists, just that the country always exists, sovereignty always exists. So you are an administration, you come in, maybe there was a whole national visioning process, long-term plan put in place by your predecessor, Vision 2030, whatever it was. And then you come in, there was a policy for prosperity and development. Then you come in, you say, no, we have to have, what's the other one called? Proper agenda.
Yeah, do we have a rest now?
Dismantle and ignore everything that was there, knowing that you're only here perhaps for 6 years, or if you're lucky, 12 years. And then you ignore everything that existed, people had done, took time, expended resources, expertise, and got advice and put together for the country. You ignore that. You put something together. Another elite group comes. They set it aside. They bring their own. That takes a country nowhere.
Are you saying that we don't have a national development plan, a national vision for Liberia that whichever administration comes in can follow or implement?
No, we do not. No, sir. We do not have a long-term vision. a long-term vision that is binding for any leader who comes in to follow strategically for the growth and prosperity of the country. We do not. What we've had and what we have now, they're called medium-term development agenda. Medium term. And even this medium-term development agenda, we're now realistic and honest with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have the money usually to implement them to the fullest as we've written them on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know, I know Liberia, everything is politics. And now I'm a politician too, because I'm involved with organizing a political party. Anything I say, people say, oh, man, that's politics, really. But we have to go above the fray, above politics, and deploy everything we have as Liberians, bring experts and, you know, our people who are trained and knowledgeable together, who care about the country, and say, look, what is the future of our country? Truly, truly, what is our strategic vision for this country, and what direction do we want to take to get to prosperity? We do not have that, Anthony. So if we can get rid of this culture of discontinuity, then we'll see our will. If we don't do that, we'll just be
But that, as you have revealed here, we don't have a national development vision,
long-term
country that, you know, that's about any administration.
We do not. Madam Sirleaf tried, so she put this so-called the 2030 vision 2030, and there was this national visioning process that happened, you know, looking back at the history and trying to really look at you know, growth and what would it take us to grow, and in how many years, and what kind of constraints do we have, how do we address those constraints, blah blah. I wasn't part of it. I was working for a development country, donor country at that time, but as a Liberian citizen, I participated fully in my role working with that country, but it gave me the opportunity to be at the table to really hear and see what's happening. But that vision has been set aside. During President Weah's administration, you didn't hear anything about it. Now,
was that adopted as a national plan or vision?
Yes, it was adopted at Banga, Bon County, Central Liberia. I was there. It was a whole week activity. It was adopted as a national document for the country. And in fact, there are visuals, you know, greenery, plush, beautiful countryside turning into modern places, how the country will look like in 30 years. And if this happened, that happened. All of those documents and research and analysis were put together. And then we've set it aside. This is not a criticism of any particular administration or president, but as a country, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to ask the hard questions, set ego aside, and say, look, this is for Liberia, not for Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, not for George Weah, not for President Boaka, it's for the country. If those who were in charge 20 years ago, 15 years ago, did a lot of work and put this together today that should last for 30 years. We do not have a 50-year plan. Let me just put it that way. We don't have a 100-year plan. Where will Liberia be in 100 years? We do not have that, Anthony. Every country must have that. If your goal is you want to become prosperous, a middle-income country, an upper middle-income country, and then you are taking intentional actions and steps to reach there, you must have that long-term vision. It can be divided into immediate term, medium term, and then long term. And then you have ways of monitoring them and measuring them, revisiting them, addressing what they call constraints. Constraints basically means the things that are holding us back to from getting to our goal, our vision, thing that we're looking for, right? If the electricity, no current, you can do industries, you can do industrialization, so that constraint. You don't have roads. And that constraint has sub constraints. They're what's called binding constraints. I mean, this is always here. It's holding us back constantly no matter what we do. There are others that just called constraints. These constraints, you can address them. Immediate constraints, other things, you can address them. So the point is, the country hasn't socialized itself whether it's through a political process or a economic exercise or a social cultural exercise, to say we'll continue, we'll have a long-term plan that will do X, Y, Z for this country, and nobody will deviate from it. How you bring the money in, who you hire to do it, that one is a matter of administrative decision making.
Yeah.
It's a matter of exercise of statecraft.
But what to do,
who to do it, when to do it, where the money coming from, how you report the money, all of that. That one, then the president comes there at a job. But to say, here's the master plan for 50 years. Here's the master plan for the Republic of Liberia for 100 years. We do not have that.
and we definitely need that. With that said, we come to the second pillar here, which is strong and capable institutions.
Correct.
So my question is, why are institutions more important than the personalities? Because we know we have them, and you are saying we must have them strong. What do you mean when you say strong, and what do you mean by capable?
Yes, there are some institutions that are strong, they're not capable. There are some institutions that are capable, they're not strong. Just like some human beings are very strong, but they're not capable, Anthony. Yeah? When the capables come, they can run. And there are some institutions that are very capable, but they're not strong. So first of all, I mean, as a scholar, others will ask, so what do you mean by institution? And then those who have been studying these kinds of stuff, practitioner scholars, they will say, well, there are different viewpoints here. They're contrarian view, what they call. So some people say it's not, institutions are important, but they're not the gold standard for prosperity, for progress. Okay. Well, for the sake of this lecture, this conversation, institutions are not the building. At the Kennedy School, the guys talk about the scholars there that focus on this thing. They talk about state capability, okay, and institutional capability. The institution has to be strong when what as Morgan Robinson called inclusive institution. It means it's an institution that allows total strangers to cooperate, to work together with one another for the sake of the common good.
Okay.
It's an institution that has, it has protective shields, it has risk management systems, it has accountability measures, what is the procurement, it's contracting processes, how you hire people based on merit, now who they are, what tribe they are, what religious background, what are they men, women, what that language they speak, none of that. You set up to attract the best Liberians who have XYZ experience or training. And that system is just the way it is. That's a strong institution. That institution becomes capable when these people can deploy the skills they say they have, the experience they say they bring to this task. And they can actually produce measurable outcome based on what was planned for the mandate.
In essence, that you're looking for skills, credentials that individuals can apply to
whatever metrics you use for recruitment, for retention, for training. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever metrics you use, you have to make sure that it's transparent and it's pluralistic, is fair. That rule of law, respect system, no connoisseur, nobody taking kickback to bring their friend, their girlfriend, their auntie, their cousin, and who don't meet the requirements. If you do that, the institution is not capable. It cannot do what it says it's set up to do, because then it's not strong enough as an institution. It begins to engage in that thing the Kennedy School people call isomorphic mimicry. It starts to look like something that is not.
Yeah, I like that. So you got to look at capability and strength. It's not the physical strength, but
No,
the ability to apply the rules, to follow the system,
yeah,
to hold everyone accountable
correct.
so that the system is fair and the system produces the desired result for the advancement of the country.
Yes, then that system, that institution is capable. It's strong enough because it follows all those rules, accountability processes. Yeah.
So if you look at our institutions, because I wanted to make them one more part, if you look at our institutions right now, do we have one few in your evaluation that you might want to go in the territory of grading as at least capable?
No,
strong?
I'm not going to grade. I'm not going to grade. I'll get in political trouble. Not I'm afraid of that. I'm a scholar. Yeah, I'm a politician, but
Okay.
I'm a scholar practitioner. But we have a larger system problem than naming any particular institution. It's like the foundation is rotting, the foundation is faulty, and we in denial about it. We're just taking our, our country cloth, and now the people wear European suit. We pass it around, swinging our arm. We say everything okay, everything now okay.
I don't think if you speak the truth here, you will get in trouble, because even our leaders in charge themselves, they know the reality. They might try to pretend about it.
Yes, well, they know the reality, but when you look deep down, you see that we are very dishonest about some fundamental, some existential things. We draw a medium-term development plan that requires $8 billion to execute. We do not have the $8 billion to do the work. Most of our money is going to public administration, wage bill and benefit and recurrent costs, things like that, to run the government every day, vehicle, gas, this and this, that. Well, we say, look, this is your
problem with the plan or the reality that it is not doable? Which one?
Well, with both of them, look, I have made some of my opinions known. And you reproduce a plan, we read it, we train people with the experts and professionals, educated Liberians alike. You read it, you interpret it to the people, you try to understand it. What this plan is set out to accomplish? What are the constraints it has identified? What's the funding models that they've done? Is this finance model realistic for our GDP, real GDP? For if you take a look at our national budget, our real national budget, budget ceilings, then if you look at our expenditure culture and practice,
you use the word real. What you mean by
real national budget.
Are you saying there's a projection and then there's the actual?
There's the actual, yes. So if you look at the actual, we're not being honest. We don't have the $8 billion. So 80% of this money will come from external sources. And then you begin to name the external sources. You will not realize that. And so you cannot really fully execute this plan in 6 years.
So those are not realistic projections.
So I'm not saying the people are not good people, or people who are in government or running the country don't know what they're doing. That's not why I'm here tonight, Anthony. That we're having a conversation about nation building.
Right. And
nation building is not an easy thing. It's doable, but it takes intentional people. It takes people with high integrity, people who really truly care about our country. Yes, compensate them well. What they did in Singapore, they pay people, private sector pay scale. Like a CEO makes millions of dollars. You pay a minister to ensure that they're not corrupt, they're not going to steal money and receive kickback or give kickbacks. You pay them very well. Okay? So I'm not saying don't compensate people properly and all of that. What I'm saying is, as a country, in order to take off, in order to truly, truly grow and get our people out of poverty, we're not there yet. Even at the conversation level, we're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
At the honesty level, we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. And those are the foundational elements.
Foundational elements.
We have to be honest with ourselves. That's the best way we can start helping ourselves.
Yeah, so if you start naming institutions, and by institutions too, scholars sometimes it can be nebulous about it. Institution is not the building, the Ministry of Education. That's not what we're talking about here, right? The Minister of Finance building, that's not what we're talking about. The act that created our institution, it's part of it, but it's not all to it. It's the practices, the norms, the culture, the strength and the capability and the services that it provides, the outcome, how it contributes overall. That's the institutionalism we're talking about, right?
Knowledge, institutional knowledge transfer.
Exactly. Well, so you said name one institution. I could start naming structures or institutions because we do have them, but a lot of them are mimicry.
All right. This one is a big one for me, and you know it, right? And you agree for Liberia, any other country for that matter, because those who are entering the craft in the nation, they can't do it in isolation of the people. So that comes to the human capital development. So talk to us. Human capital development as one of the pillars of nation building. All right. Let's talk about that. How essential this aspect is compared to the rest.
We've seen countries deploy human capital development as a long-term strategic vision and taking directions that led them to it. We looked at what happened in Singapore. We looked at what happened in South Korea. What's happening in China? What's happening in Botswana and in Rwanda as well. Kenya is doing a little bit of this. They're not quite there yet. But the question is, how educated is our population? And I don't want to be too academic about this because people say, all right, by education you mean, then we define what education we're talking about and all of that. But how trained, whether it's vocational technical education, whether it's the ability to innovate, science, technology, or markets, finance, economics, how trained. So the human capital development is, as a nation, you say, okay, so in the exercise of statecraft, we have natural resources underground, but we also have natural resources walking on top of the ground.
Yeah.
That includes the human being, us. We are natural resources ourselves. Okay, so you consciously, intentionally say, as a strategic matter, these young people that are riding motorbikes, pumping around the country, we're going to move them from over the bike. They are our future. We want to make them scientists. We want to make them technologists. We want to make them computer literate people who can innovate. So to do that, you must first give broad-based power. Don't take the power to yourself so that you can protect your wealth as an elite. Start to give power, which means allow the people their constitutional rights and obligations, to hold the government accountable, to advocate, to form unions, to elect people, to remove people from office. That way, you hold the government accountable, right? And then create the economic structure in a way that this human development you're focusing on, when you train your people, they're able then to freely innovate to help this country to become prosperous. They start creating apps. They start creating, technology hubs. They start creating things that bring foreign direct investment to the country or investors to the country. They start creating this environment and enterprises that bring business opportunities from overseas to their country. And then it allows the country then to exercises external relations properly based on what's happening inside the country. That cannot happen when you haven't fully invested in your people. You can effectively engage in statecraft when you haven't invested in your people, because the leaders of the country are not people from another planet. or another country, right? There are people who were grown in the country. So they must have gone to school in the country. Or if they went to school outside, but they're Liberians, they're coming home, maybe they want to get education to come back home. This is your human capital. How do you deploy this human capital without it readying it, making this asset ready for deployment for use? Like anything, your vehicle, before you drive, right? You make sure you gas your vehicle, there's oil in it, you maintain it properly. It's the same thing. You want your citizens to be assets, to be capital for prosperity, to drive growth and development. You must train them in ways that they will contribute. And you're not training them in a vacuum. It will be part of your overall long-term growth strategy. Others say, look, we want to have a highly scientifically, technologically competent, educated population. They build that. So right now, North Korea and Singapore, those are the technology hubs, right? Silicon Valley in the United States, strong partnership with companies in North Korea, strong partnership with companies in Singapore. So too in China. Now we're seeing in Rwanda, their universities and their schools, that's where we send our own children now to go to school, because they decided reconciliation is not enough, social cohesion is not enough. We have to have strong investment in human capital development, and therefore they build their educational system, their universities, the science technology colleges, the high schools, curriculum, instruction, they build it up, and it's now producing benefits, dividends. We're seeing it in how the country is turning out. That's why we're sending our own kids there, because we don't trust our own system at home. We haven't done the hard work to invest in it. So the point of human capital development, Anthony, is the microcosm of everything that we've talked about. If you don't have strong human capital development, you cannot have a strong statecraft. You can't have people who know or learn or exercise statecraft because they're not trained. You can't even
have the strong and capable institutions we talk about.
Yeah, we talk about. So you need a human being to drive it. If you don't have a driver, the vehicle does not move, right? So Jim Collins, the business scholars whose work people using in MBA business schools, who talks about looking at institution as the bus, BUS, bus. He said, you have to have a way of removing the wrong passengers from the bus and putting the right passengers on the bus. There's a whole process. It's not enough to put new passengers on the bus. It's as important to identify which seat who sits on, and then who sits in the premium seat. Who is the driver of this bus? Any vehicle, if you don't have a driver in the driver's seat, the vehicle does not move, right?
Right.
The driver's seat is the most used seat in any vehicle. Why is that so? Institutions,
because the goal of the vehicle is to move.
It cannot move on. Now there's AI assisted vehicles. They're still building it. I don't know if I can get you one of them yet. That is but until that happens, no vehicle moves without a driver. An airplane does not move without the pilot. So you take that to the human capital development, you see how important that is. And then it factors into all kinds of other areas of policy making, education policy, science, technological training, technical vocational education, and other types of training that people ought to have.
What types of training? And sport, Dad, don't forget about sports. Sport is big now in the world.
Sport is big, and it's not just about formal education too. It's really about the social cultural fabric of the society, the moral fabric of the society, acculturating people, socializing people to be responsible citizens. That's human capital development as well. You drink, you don't just throw the water, plastic in the street, throw the garbage all around. You drive in the city, smelly and dirty, and people in their psyche, they've been trained and socialized that they can't live like that. They'll have to take that trash home or find a trash can in the community and throw it in, and you have an organized system for people to pick it up.
Yeah, that will lead up to the fourth and final pillar, which is social trust and national cohesion. And we were just learning on sport, and I know sport can actually play or can be used,
Bring people together.
you know, to really look at it in a very holistic way.
So with this, Anthony, you're right. Like, bro, we tried that. We see the county leagues, the county meets. The goal is to bring all counties to interact with one another. At least so people to show solidarity to their home counties and put aside politics and differences and come together. In other countries, in Nigeria, they have the NSC and the National Youth Corps program, where you go in a different region than yours and serve there for 1 year after university before you can take a job or after high school. So different countries do it differently. Rwanda, they focus on the one Rwanda concept, where they say, look, there's no Hutu, no Tutsi. Yeah, this thing brought war before. We really want to make sure that there's social trust and national cohesion. Sometimes it's called reconciliation. To do this, there are scholars who have said you cannot do it in the absence of people having power in their own hands. That broad-based distribution of political power to the people, okay, so that they see prosperity, they participate in making the prosperity, in innovating in private sector and all of that. And then they see growth and development happening around them. They have jobs and so on. So people are not focusing on, oh, that tribe, this tribe, I don't like these people. I don't like that. Oh, you are Muslim, you are Christian, you are this and that. There's prosperity. People are happy. They have jobs. They can send their kids to school. They have good hospitals. They have good roads, the vehicles, and they have safety measures. The police is functioning well. They live in a happy, prosperous society. So there's less focus on division, what divides us. There's more focus on what brings us together.
And so I asked the question that
social trust element, let me end with the social trust element, though, is if the elites do well by the people, provide these services, the social contracts, right? Citizens then trust the elites, they trust the politicians to represent them. But if they're not governing properly, there's no trust. And that distrust can lead to destabilization and conflict.
Okay. Yeah. So my question is, why is social trust essential for economic growth and democratic stability?
Yeah, because economic growth does not like instability. It does not like chaos. It doesn't thrive in chaos and instability. Economic growth happens when there's stability. It happens when people are laser focused on creating hubs of economic, prosperity, economic activities, entrepreneurship, and things like that. So to do that, you really have to ensure that there's social trust. People believe in the system. They believe that there's a sanctity of contract that I always talk about, that if there's disagreement between me and Anthony, we come together, we start a startup, and we start doing well, and then there's some kind of contract and dispute over contracts. Maybe it's not between us. Maybe we have a partner outside, or we have some vendor or something of some sort. So we can actually go to court, and the law will look at the evidence and the law, and they'll administer justice. So there's that trust in the system. Okay. The people trust the politicians because they see that the politicians are truly governing. If you're an elected official, your oversight, your governance responsibility, your legislating responsibility, your lawmaking function, your what I call your democratic role of a lawmaker, of a legislator, you know it and you're exercising it. You go back to your district, you interact with your people. You are advocating, bringing the issues on the national stage from the community, from your constituency on the national stage. It's not your job to go build one bridge for them personally. It's not your job to go build a bus stop for them personally. That's not your legislative function. So if you understand your role, your your democratic role as a legislator, then you are enhancing social trust because you're really governing and you're representing well. If you are an appointed government official, there is civic trust that has been entrusted to you. You may perhaps it's some public asset, public institution that you are leading. It could be, you have access to public funds. And are you do you have the integrity? Do you have the ethical well-water to govern yourself in a way that people respect you, they respect the institution? Are you delivering? Are you functioning well in that role? All of these things can lead to social trust. And social trust, therefore, is necessary for economic growth and prosperity.
All right, folks, we are willing to take calls for those of you who would like to participate. We just posted the number in the live feed there, both Facebook and YouTube. And it is right beneath me here. As you can see, it's right here. You can dial that number. That number is 605-313-6004. The code to enter is if you call that as a teleconference number, then you will get in line. First come, first serve. That is how we do it here at Focus on Liberia. We want you to call if you have a question for our guest, Dr. Ahmed Sirleaf. You can ask that question. If you just want to comment, if you just want to give your feedback based on his presentation, you can also do so by dialing that number 605-313-6004 and then enter the code 791403#. Now, if you are in Liberia or some part of the world and you want to call like WhatsApp, the number to call is 651-392-6224. That number is in the strolling text below. I will also post it in the live feed for you to see. Again, that number is 651-392-6224. That is the WhatsApp number to call. But we encourage US-based callers or followers to call the teleconference number because we're talking about, statecraft, following system and all that. So you fall in line, first come, first served, so we can take your call. We will love to hear from you. We have been discussing statecraft. What is statecraft? Understanding statecraft, and we went to the 4 pillars of statecraft, and our presenter, as I said earlier, is Dr. Ahmed Sirleaf, who have been helping us to understand what statecraft is. It is a very important subject that helps us as a people and as a nation to understand how we build our nation. That is the essence of statecraft, how to go about nation building by understanding all the elements of statehood or nationhood and how to go about developing the country. And when we have understanding of this concept of statecraft and we are intentional about implementation, understanding that will get us to where we need to go, then definitely, according to our presenter here, we will make a lot different. And that while we wait on callers, there are other countries that are doing well, whereas some other countries are struggling. From the perspective of statecraft, is it fair to say that those who are doing well is because they're doing better with understanding statecraft and implementing it, and those who are doing poorly, is it because they have either poor understanding or not knowing how to apply statecraft to nation building? Is that why they're struggling, or are there other variables in between?
No, there are other variables. Yes, people, countries are not doing poorly just because the leaders don't know what they're doing. There's that thing we talked about in the Robinson Asmoglu book. It's called the ignorance trap, the ignorance hypothesis. It's not because the leaders are ignorant. Sometimes it could be actually reverse statecraft. If there's such thing, it could be intentional in practices in ways that will make sure that the elite maintain the power that they have already, and as a result, they neglect other aspects that will help the country grow. Okay, so some countries are autocratic countries, some are dictatorship, the different forms of government. Some are monarchies, some are constitutional democracy, liberal democracy, the different forms. Some are communist countries. And so you look at the political system of the country, look at the history of the country as well. And then scholars that don't believe so much in the institutionalism argument, they say, well, geography is the problem. Let's look at geography and culture. That in the Asmaglu book, they list countries, the illustrations that there's a map, and then they mark all the black areas. These are countries that are poor. Most of them in Africa, 90% of them in Africa. Few in Latin America, Southern American countries, and a few in Asia. Right? You look at Cambodia, Nepal, and some countries like that. Okay, then there's a place where they talk about culture. So, well, culture is not really the problem, because if you look at a Nogales example, whereby in Arizona, there's a place called Nogales, the same culture that's just divided by the border wall across the same people, same culture. The difference is you have legal, constitutional structure and systems and institutions on the United States side that's making it more prosperous versus the Sonora, Nogales, and the Mexico side. They don't have sort of similar legal structure that are rule of law and human rights and protects everything. So they're poorer. They have poorer health outcomes and so on. So it's not because, again, the leaders don't know statecraft, because everything you do in administering the affairs of your state, of your country, in public administration, essentially you're engaging in statecraft. The only elements people really miss most times is the intentionality. The intentionality. You see a lot of countries who engage in planning. They have planning departments or planning ministries, right? They have fiscal department, Minister of Finance. They have the monetary department, the central banking. They exercise the tools of state power, right? They have a foreign affairs department. They engage in information practices. In Liberia, we have a Ministry of Information, a whole Ministry of Information. And then you have a presidential press secretary. Some countries have that, to tell the stories of the presidency, essentially. So, yeah, they're engaging in statecraft. They may not master it. They may not fully understand it, know that that's what they're engaging in, but they're engaging in it. So if you don't understand it, you don't have that intentionality, and therefore you miss the strategic implementation of statecraft, as it were.
So, yes, the presidency, and if the presidency does not understand statecraft, but then there are other state actors who are advising the president. If they understand statecraft, that nation should be okay, right?
Oh, yeah. We don't expect our president to know everything. That's the ministers. The cabinet is the president's assistant, the cabinet as a whole. So the ministers are technical people, trained people in the fields. Political appointees, yes, but we expect that they bring something to the table. And then the president has advisors on a number of subjects: economic advisor, political advisor, religious advisor, right? These people supposedly have the technical expertise and training and experience to advise the chief executive and say, look, Mr. President, based on your overall vision for the country, this political matter ought to be treated XYZ, or here is the context where you are operating politically. Here's the context where you're operating economically. What do you need for economic growth and other economic advisor? I imagine those are the kinds of things they're doing. A religious advisor perhaps want to make sure, spiritually the government is grounded, but also there's unity and cohesion from religious perspective in the country. So the president does not even have to know statecraft. It's a plus.
Why are some threats, if I may ask, why are some threat to statecraft?
Some threats, if I understand that properly is when you see the tools of power, of state power, of the nation state. We talked about state power earlier, diplomacy, information, military, economics, right? If you see that they've been used effectively, and we're very intentional about diplomacy, our foreign policy, alliance with our domestic affairs, or the government is constantly stating what they view as the national strategic interest. This is our overall goal we must accomplish. This is why we appoint ambassadors around the country to represent us, interact with other nations. This is why we have a foreign minister who has a foreign policy team. This is why we have this foreign policy objective or set of foreign policy objectives. When you start to see those intentional carving out of the elements of state power, then you realize these people are engaging in statecraft and they know what they're doing. They're intentional about what they're doing.
I know we talked about human resource earlier. Now in statecraft, you need to have representatives in the government who are the one actually carrying on all the functions of statecraft. So would the government suffer from a huge deficit or liability if the actors who are to implement all the elements of statecraft don't have the capabilities that we talked about earlier? That means they still will be having some challenges in terms of moving forward, right, in terms of nation building.
Anthony, look, see a nation as a gigantic organization. Yeah, look at Liberia. This is an entity. This is a gigantic organization. It's a complex organization, right? So you run it like you run any other organization, except that it's very complex. It has these institutions, constitution that divides different branches of government. They all have separate roles and things like that. And so if you don't attract the right talents, or you're not intentional about who you hire or who you appoint, then that institution may not be strong. It may not be capable. That country may not be strong, may not be capable. That government may not be strong, may not be capable. So you want to have both elements. If you look at it from the human development, the human capital development frame, if you look at that framework, you say, okay, so we have to be realistic. Liberia is a tribal country. We have people from different regions speak different. This is a Kisi government. This is a Lufa people government. We joke about it, but it's serious, right? If people begin to perceive a government and administration that light, then they're telling you, okay, so they're not intentional about social cohesion and civic trust and social trust by ensuring that there's representation all across the country. Not saying that's what's happening, but I'm saying when you hear that kind of anecdote, then it tells you that in the consciousness of the people, they're saying, oh, we're seeing one region or one particular tribal group more represented. Okay, so the point is, make the government strong by appointing the right people, hiring the right people, and then have a system in place that everybody knows what they're doing and they can be held accountable. You can actually see outcomes, and there's a reporting system that you can monitor and track that. And in this administration, to their credit, they put together some kind of performance management scheme. Right there. Whether or not they're truly implementing it, following it, I'm not close of that knowledge to know. But at least they thought about it. Someone thought about it. So the point is, yes, statecraft cannot happen without the crafters, without the actors who know their craft. You must know their craft. Statecraft is basically government. Is understanding government, understanding how to run a government. You understand that, you have that skill, those skill set and experience, then you are one who knows their craft.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed Sirleaf. And folks in cyberspace, we want to say thank you for staying with us. There has been a very interesting topic. We have been discussing statecraft, what is statecraft, and understanding statecraft with our guest, Dr. Ahmed Sirleaf. Dr. Sirleaf, this is how we'll come to the end of the broadcast. We will come back to you here for your concluding and parting words here. So, what do you want to leave with us? And my question to that is, why should we care about statecraft? I know you said all of the beautiful things, but why should we care about this? How important is this? Why should we even know about this?
The most important thing is like you asked the question, why should we care about government, how government runs? Statecraft is how government runs properly, how you should run a government properly, how you should run your public administration properly. All branches of the government, all arms of your country's government. That's what statecraft is about. They say state, right? The nation state. State is statecraft is the art and science of running a country, of building a nation. The arts and science of building a there's scientific component, there's art component, because some of it you make it up as you go. You're designing things, you're planning, you're moving. So we should, people should pay attention to this stuff, look it up, hold people accountable, try to understand what elements been implemented, because up and down, whether you are an elite or you're just part of the masses, or you're an office bureaucrat or street level bureaucrats, somehow you're an agent of the state, you're agent of the government, and you are engaging in statecraft unknown to yourself. Which means you are helping to run the government. And so you have to know your role. You have to question yourself, am I doing it effectively? Am I competent at this stuff? Am I in the right job? Am I in the right sector? People looking for work, sometimes they're not honest with themselves. They're not realistic. But that's why we should know about statecraft, because those who understand, the countries that understand statecraft, they're very intentional about how they want to grow their country, how they want to bring prosperity to their people, what is the vision around that, and what strategic direction are they taking to get to that. And therefore, they deploy all the tools of state power to that end. If we don't understand it, we cannot plan properly. We cannot organize. We're doing things haphazardly. We do a little bit of roads, a little bit of electricity, a little bit of garbage collection, a little bit of education. We have meetings, we go to schools, we hang out with kids. We think that's education. We think that we're building human capital, but we're not, because we're not intentional. We're not able to sit down to have a 50-year plan, 100-year, 200-year plan. When Ahmed Sirleaf is no longer around, children and grandchildren that will come, what would they see? What was the blueprint that led them to the prosperity that they see and enjoy today? So a country that doesn't do that is directionless. And we've seen in history, countries that have done that have enjoyed some measure of prosperity and success.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed Sirleaf, there, dissecting, explaining, and expounding on the topic statecraft and understanding statecraft. We thank you enough. And folks, this is a series. We will be here as much as we can every Wednesday to discuss as many topics as possible.
On the 17th and the 24th, I think,
on
right?
The 17th,
okay. 24th. Yeah, I just want to thank the audience. Though people didn't call, I would have appreciated that. I hope they'll send questions later to you or to me directly. Those who will watch it later on, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to engage in this conversation, this kind of dialogue about country and lessons we can learn from other countries. There's really an effort to bring some of this kind of conversation in some lecture series. Even in Liberia, we intend to engage with the University of Liberia to organize, public lectures around these kinds of conversations and nation building practices, to bring experts, to bring practitioners and leaders to these kinds of fora and forums to help us dissect some of the issues and conscientize our people for the prosperity and the growth of Liberia. So thank you for the opportunity, Anthony.
Thank you so much. And with that, we say thank you and bye-bye.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, From education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology, Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is